see that game last night?
I did watch the entire game last
You
night.
watched the entire Super Bowl?
I did. I'm really tired.
I didn't see it down. Was it as boring as the score would lead one to
Yeah,
believe?
it was a good old fashioned butt kicking from start to finish. I mean, it wasn't a competitive Super Bowl at all.
No.
So
I guess it's not rigged.
no, well, I guess not. So it was funny. In the first 5 minutes or so, there was a catch by the Eagles, and they got offensive pass interference.
Yeah,
and everyone at my house was like, because I threw a party for it. Everyone said, "Oh, here we go. The game is rigged. The refs are in it." And then it proceeded to not matter at all for the next four quarters of the game.
I just kind of go on to ESPN every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
It was like pick six or something like
Yeah.
that. God, it's brutal.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the three-peat right now is pretty much the hardest thing to do in professional sports is win 3 Super Bowls in a row. No one's done it, but there's been a lot of doubles.
The other big news is on this very table an hour ago, I bought a house.
Yes, you did. You are now a resident of Atlanta again.
Coming back to Georgia.
Yes, which is a great song. Well, Walking Back.
Yeah.
Yeah, great Jim Croce song.
It's in our letter this month. I have a general idea of what we're talking to, but I'm going to kind of let you run the show and tell me what to do.
Sure.
But I will say that the mortgage payments are a little bit higher than I expected.
Yeah, they're probably 2 or 3 times higher than you remember paying for a mortgage last time you were here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 6% interest rate's not a joke.
I got I got just a hair under.
Just
6.
a hair under. Yeah. And it's crazy too. You know, when I bought my house last year, my wife and I did. It was our first house. Same thing. When I saw the number, I was like, "There's no way. There's no way we'll ever recover from this." But you know, you just hope that you buy it and you get a manageable cash flow payment, something you can handle every month. And then you can, hopefully refinance it later.
So I do know those are our 2 magical words of the day: cash flow.
Yes.
So what are we talking? I told you, hey, let's talk about cash flow.
Mm.
We are looking at conscious wealth a little bit differently now. We've had 4. We have 4 pillars.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being financial wealth, and underneath that, there's cash flow as one of the foundations. So I said, hey, let's talk about cash flow.
Yeah, and cash flow is the single most important thing in talking about any kind of business or personal finance. Ultimately, all planning that we do is just a game of cash flows, right? When you make an income, when you're still working, you generate cash, and then you have expenses, and then at the end, you decide what to do with the remainder, right? And there's classical views of zero-based budgeting, which is every month I need to know exactly where all my money is going, and the goal is that whether it's saved or spent, I have $0 left at the end of the month. So you're never really sitting on cash or always deploying it to some kind of bucket, right? And we talk about that a little bit. We're not as beholden to that, but I know Dave Ramsey is a huge zero cash budgeter. And cash flow also is really important to our entrepreneurial clients and people who run businesses.
Yeah.
Ultimately, accounts receivable doesn't, pay the bills, it doesn't put the lights on. It's all about cash. Are we having enough coming in? Am I putting out enough towards investments or employees or whatever runs the business? So it's a really important topic to cover.
Yeah, well, and I don't think we clearly defined it. You just jumped right into it because I know you're in the thick of it all the time. Mm-hmm. And this is what you studied as well. But yeah, so cash flow being how much cash is being generated from a certain organization, institution, investment.
Right.
And we've seen it's just so painful. We've seen entrepreneurs with great businesses, fantastic IP, and when the cash flow isn't working, it's the most painful thing because it's existential.
Yeah.
A company can disappear without cash flow.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and when it comes to thinking about more specifically what we do day to day,
yes,
if you have someone who is investing, the idea is that their investments over time will generate a cash flow for them.
Yeah.
Right, and it can do it through dividends, you can do it through interest, or you can generate cash flow by selling assets. Right, so if you put $100,000 in, and 30 years later you get $1 million over time of investing, that $1 million you can live off of. You don't just have to take the income. Sometimes you can just sell a little bit of it, use it to pay yourself, and then replace your cash flow that you may not have from working with those assets.
Yeah. And that's something I want to focus on too, is cash flow off of our investments. Mm-hmm. And if you've worked with our clients, anyone who's watching this, our clients have heard us say a million times, you can take 4% off a portfolio in a sustainable manner, and you won't meaningfully take history and statistics tell us you won't meaningfully take from your assets.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the 4% is coming from interest and dividends.
Yeah, not at all. And
Not today.
Not today. And now you could do that, right? Like you could find an instrument to go out and get a 4%, we'd call it like a yield, right? So somewhere between price appreciation and dividend income, like on a bond. But why would you give up the long-term value of growth in your portfolio? Just sell a little bit of stock that was a winner, and use that.
Well, you could go out and buy a treasury, like
Sure.
a 10-year treasury at 4, but that's not keeping up with inflation. So
Right.
so that's where your point is, and I know you know this, but also explaining it. Yeah, you could go out there and get 4%, but it won't keep up with inflation.
Right.
You could go out and get 6, 7%, but the risk you're carrying is that the investment will devalue or decrease in value, right?
Right.
Or you could go out there and buy all utility stocks with a higher dividend, but then we find out, well, utilities may or may not be in this year, and everything else has grown. So I've talked a while. What's a sustainable cash flow off of a portfolio now?
Yeah, so a sustainable cash flow off portfolio right now is, obviously you mentioned the 4% rule. That rule comes from a really good place of assuming some kind of long-term return, like 7%, right? That's typically what you hear between a balanced portfolio. So we hold a little bit of bonds, we hold a little bit of stocks, have some cash. Long-term view, if you look back at the numbers, has been 7%. You take 4 off to live off of, and there's kind of a 3% buffer for inflation, or extra growth there. So I think that number still works really well. Oh, sorry, was that not the question you're asking?
I'm asking a different question.
Sure.
So we'll just start that question over again.
Sure.
So if you don't want to get 4% or 6% straight from your portfolio, then what percent is the right percent to get for interest and dividends, JP?
Oh yeah, for interest and dividends, you can reasonably expect 2 to 3%, depending on the investments that you're in.
Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah.
What's the S&P right now? Like 1.9?
Yeah, the S&P, now that it's more tech heavy, has gone down. It's actually 1.9. For a long time, it's about 2.3%.
Yeah. So the question we get is, well, all right, so I'm not supposed to go for 4 or 7 because I won't keep up with inflation or my assets may go down.
Right.
So how do we get that 2% up to the next 2% to get the 4, which is a sustainable rate?
Yeah, you would add in some kind of, more income-driven asset, like you would have bonds in a portfolio, right? Or you have to have growth in your assets.
Yeah.
I mean, the smartest way to do it is just outgrow the problem, right? Be in the market for a long time, add to your investments. They will grow, hopefully, over that time period, and then you'll just have a bigger pool to draw from.
Yeah. So, and that's why a lot of times you'll hear JP and I, or you'll hear out, oh, you've got an income and growth portfolio. Yeah, both income and growth are components of creating that 4% cash flow.
Exactly.
Right now, it's not very prudent to get more income for most of our clients, more than 2.5% of income. So the growth has got to take care of the rest. Last 10 years, crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next 10 years, maybe not. Hopefully we don't have that big of a, but it's like you average out the growth over an entire investment cycle.
Right.
And you're able to rely, or what's the word I'm looking for? You're able to utilize that growth to fund what you're not getting in direct cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, everyone wants to save. I think most people want to get to a place where they can save. That's always, and essentially, when you save, you have positive cash flow, right? So you're spending less than you're earning through whatever income that is. What do I do with that money? It's actually the question we get the most is like, I have some extra cash. What do I do with it? Invest it.
Invest it.
Right? I mean, it's the simple answer, because it's very, very hard to find examples where that was the wrong idea over essentially more than a 3-year time period.
So we know companies have these moments of stress with cash flow. Yeah. When do human beings have these moments of cash flow stress?
Yeah, sure. Very commonly, it's over leverage, so having too much debt and trying to service those obligations.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the easiest one, right?
Yeah.
It's really easy to do. A great example is you just bought a house. You do well for yourself. You bought a house you could afford. It fits within your cash flow. There's a term. It's like being cash poor, right? It's like house poor. I spent all my money on this house, and now I don't have any money to save anything because I bought essentially too much of an asset. And now servicing that debt erodes your ability to save for the future, right?
Yep.
So that's a very common way as well.
Over debt.
Over leveraged. I mean, honestly, under earning, right? Some people should
Lose your job.
lose your job, right?
Yeah.
Or you just, maybe you're waiting on a promotion, you didn't get it.
Illness.
Illness. Yeah.
These are all the things where if you don't have cash flow, you're no longer able to access your sources. Why we're always talking about also death. Well, maybe not for you, but for your family.
Sure.
Which is a big thing that when we look at estates for families is there enough money to settle this estate?
Yeah.
Or do we have to go out and sell an illiquid investment just to be able to settle an estate, which is less than ideal?
Yeah. Do we have to go sell, the house that we inherited to cover whatever obligations were out there? Yeah, but really, it's I think you made a good point. Really, the two most common ones are unemployment, right? If you get laid off, or if an illness prevents you from working, and over leverage, just having too much debt, are the most common ones.
Yeah.
The other one is just owning too many liquid assets.
Oh,
That's the other one, right? It's buying too many private assets.
Yeah. Some of the people that do what we do will tell their clients to have 30, 40% in private investments.
Yeah.
They slap this label on it that makes it sound good, but I'm like, have you been to Kroger?
Yeah, exactly.
Not everything private's good.
Yeah.
But they don't have cash flow and they're illiquid, and sometimes the redemption fee or the expense of redeeming it, you may lose 30% overnight.
Yeah. And I definitely think it's very common in our industry where the larger the wealth pool goes, they think, oh, well, you can put more into private assets because there's an expectation, the return is better. The problem is if you put too many in, it creates the same problem as over leverage because it's locked up.
Yeah.
If your lifestyle changes with any of the things that we talked about, all of a sudden you're going to be in a cash crunch. It doesn't really matter that your investments are earning you more money. If you can't touch them, all of a sudden that becomes an issue. So investing in things, whether it's a personal business or different investments you or your advisor finds, you want to make sure you don't overdo it.
Yeah, another thing we do is, and I'm just thinking out loud because we don't really script these, is we do have this line of credit for our clients too.
Right.
Which is good. Sometimes our clients get hit with a tax bill they weren't expecting.
Sure.
And they can't sell their company stock, or for one reason or another, they can't access cash until a month or two later. Then we create this cash flow for them, or a nice line of credit, which every business ought to have, or family could have access to as a way to free up or relieve some of the pressure.
Yeah, short-term capital. I mean, sometimes it's good, especially if you're exiting a business, right? You may be, hey, I just got a note that says in June I get my payout, but I need to, I got in a car wreck, I need to buy a car. Well, you can either go get a car loan, or if a line of credit is cheaper, your personal line of credit, maybe you just go float a car for a couple months and then you pay it off later. There's all kinds of different ways you can utilize that. You don't want to overutilize it, but it is a helpful tool to smooth out your cash flow.
I feel like this is one of the most exciting videos we've ever done.
That's great. That's what I talk about all day. I love it. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not, even though it's a little bit on the wonkier side and we're talking about withdrawal rates from portfolios or cash flow, it is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If a client understands fundamentally their cash flow and all the levers that they can pull, then the world is their oyster, right? Everything becomes a little bit easier to understand.
Not only to understand, and I agree with you, but it just takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah.
When we can say to a client, look, here's what you're going to have from your assets. And this is what you're going to get from all, and kind of illustrate to them, here's the safety that's provided from all of these different sources. And what is the level of safety you get? Because not all of them are equal.
Right.
Kind of the shoulders drop. And you're like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Now I can just go out there and do good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be yourself.
All right. Well, let's go do that.
All right, great.
Cheers.